The abandoned, antiquated Victorian house that stood at the end of Deer Creek Lane had a reputation. Not one that it had lived up to in our lives, though. I remember passing it a few times when Dad took me and my older brother fishing on fishing trips farther down the creek, to where the waterway widened and fed into the river. These were the good days. The times before my brother died were always good, it seemed. At least, in my memory. Mom says I have a gilded frame around my memories of those times, and that things weren't as whitewashed as I would like to believe. But my brother Alex, 5 years older than me, took a special brotherly delight in telling me spooky stories about the old house on Deer Creek Lane. He said back in the 1800s, a man built a house to impress his young bride. She was enchanted by the new wave of occultism that had recently found its way into the community. So, he designed and constructed a parlor with adjoining rooms for seances and the midnight tea parties she had been so fond of. The husband had dedicated all of his free time to the project, working until he was exhausted. My brother said that by the time the house was ready to move into, the man looked like a freak show zombie. I didn't know what that looked like, but inferred from his tone that it was every bit as horrible and terrifying as a regular zombie. The couple became the center of attention in the surrounding town, and not for all the right reasons either. The people who joined in their events weren't from here. They were from other counties. Talk in the town started to hint that the woman was a witch and her husband a Satanist. 2 years after they moved in, on Halloween night, the man went batshit crazy and killed his wife, 3 of her friends, 2 of his friends, and himself. In the middle of a midnight tea party, he is said to have closed the pocket doors and flipped the lock, turned to the fireplace where he grabbed a poker, and just started swinging until no one was moving. Then, he used an antique dagger and nearly cut off his own head. Believable? Well, it depends how old you are, I suppose. At the tender young age of 7, I believed every single word of it. And because my older brother, whom I idolized, was the storyteller, I couldn't do anything but believe. After he realized I believed the story, he told me other ones, like, if you throw stones at the west side of the house on Halloween night, the demon in the shape of a haggard man will chase you away. Or, the more popular one in town, if you throw beer bottles against any side of the house on Halloween night, the couple will visit you in your sleep and cut your throat so deep your head is almost severed. Now, I enjoyed these stories even though they scared the bejesus right out of me. Part of the enjoyment was that my brother was imparting what I considered grown-up knowledge to me. Just a lowly kid, a baby brother, a 7-year-old tag-along who still cried when he fell and cut his knee sometimes. Then, on my 9th birthday, the unthinkable happened. We were having the party at the local park because it was late July and hot. All of us kids could run and play under the huge elms and maples, and the adults could sit under the large pavilion. And that's exactly what we did. We were chasing each other with Super Soaker water guns. Alex was on my team, even though he was a teenager and could have went to sit and talk with our cousin. When we refilled our guns for the 5th time, Alex said he had to go to the bathroom. The bathroom was a small square building at the edge of the parking lot, about 50 feet from the road. As I was filling his gun, the sound of metal crunching and glass shattering spun me in his direction. It was over by the time I turned completely around, and Alex was splayed at the bottom of the brick wall. A car had sped around a blind turn and hit a young couple on a motorcycle. The motorcycle flipped, throwing both riders, and then slammed into Alex, crushing him against the wall. That's the day my good memories end. Life was bleak, dark, depressed, angry, and volatile after that day. I had taken up with a rough crowd by the time I was in high school, and after graduation, that I barely accomplished, I moved out of my parents' house and in with my friend, Max. We worked dead-end jobs at fast food joints mostly, and were always looking for our next thrill, which usually meant doing something at least borderline illegal. One year, around the end of October, we got talking about the house on Deer Creek Lane. We swapped stories and drank beer until we were hyped. I had been interested in the paranormal since Alex's death. 3 nights before Halloween, Max and I drove out and parked on the badly overgrown lane and looked up at that foreboding, decaying remnant of the house. It was still mostly intact, but I don't think I would have ever trusted it enough to try to go inside. The whole thing shunted oddly off to the right, as if it might lie down and take a nap at any time. Just to test the stories, we threw a few bottles at the sides of the house, yelled for whatever was in there to do its worst, and nothing happened. Around 2 a.m, we went back to the apartment. Still nothing happened. The night of Halloween, we invited friends over to drink beer and have a cookout. We were too young to enjoy the Halloween dances and parties that the older folks went to, and we were too old to do much of anything else. Really, a bunch of 20 and 21-year-olds going trick-or-treating wasn't very appealing. Going to the haunted houses was lame by then, and the haunted corn maze had a line that stretched out a few hundred feet of people waiting their turn. Max brought up the house on Deer Creek Lane, and I shared a couple stories I'd heard, just to get the others started in with their stories. By 10 that night, 5 of us guys had decided it would be a good idea, and a thrill, to go throw bottles and rocks at that house. It was the night when all that bad shit was supposed to happen after all. Max nudged me with his elbow, laughing. It was an inside joke, you see. We knew there was nothing there. We knew nothing was going to happen, but the others didn't. It would be our chance to scare the hell out of Tristan, Corey, or Bryson, the self-mandated tough guys of our circle. At 11, we parked in front of the house. The headlights washed over the leaning structure, turning everything shades of black and gray. The moon was almost full and thick clouds rolled over the sky. The air was still warm. Probably felt warmer due to all the alcohol we'd drunk. Corey, naturally, was the first one to yell out at whatever might or might not be in the house. He was also the first one to throw a bottle. It smashed just under a window, and the liquid foamed as it ran down the peeling paint. When nothing happened, Tristan and Bryson immediately followed suit. Soon, we were all caught up in it, jeering and taunting, swearing, and throwing every foul symbol we could think of. In the end, neither Max or I had the opportunity to scare the others. But just to be honest, it was more fun to throw shit at that supposedly haunted house and scream obscenities at the top of our lungs. It was a real tension reliever for me. And when we left at midnight, it was more relaxed than I had been in a long time. Back at the apartment, we turned on a Halloween horror marathon, drank more beer. Corey was totally plastered when he announced loudly that he had to drain the main vein, headed for the bathroom. We heard him stumble into the wall, then the bathroom door. It was funny until I realized sometime later that he had been gone a very long time. The others said he'd probably just passed out on the toilet. We all laughed some more. Max was next to go. He told Corey to finish up or scoot over and laughed. After a moment, he yelled, "Incoming!" and flung the bathroom door open, and almost immediately, a more sober-sounding Max said, "He's not in here. Better check the bedrooms, Joel." I checked my bedroom, which was the closest to the bathroom. Not in here either. Check the tub. Dumbass probably fell in. Max came out. His face was pale and his eyes big. And he whispered, "There's blood in the tub. Like, a lot of blood in the tub." I pushed past him, determined to be pissed if it was his idea of a joke. But it wasn't. There was a lot of blood. Too much blood for Corey to be okay, if in fact it was his blood. The tiny window was still shut and locked from the inside, and there were no bloody tracks outside the tub. You got me. A little scared and a lot drunk, I pushed by him and went back to the living room. I told Tristan and Bryson that I had been punked by two assholes, and I got another beer, though I didn't immediately take a drink. That blood had looked real, not like the Halloween crap they sold at Walmart. I yelled for Max to come on back and not be sore because I didn't fall for his prank. There was no answer. I yelled again, and a muffled, strangling noise came from the hallway, and we all three turned to lean and look around the corner. A dark splash of blood decorated one wall and part of the ceiling. Spots as big as quarters shone like oil on the worn linoleum. But we saw no one. A stab of panic shot through me, and then I was mad. One of us would have to clean that shit up, and it wasn't going to be me. If Max wanted to play stupid games and spray fake blood all over the walls, well, he would be the one scrubbing it later. So stomping down the hall, I called out to him. I was ready to throw a punch as soon as I saw him. Thing is, he was nowhere to be found. All the windows were locked from the inside. Tristan and Bryson checked all the rooms behind me, sure that I was in on some sort of elaborate Devil's Night hoax. Bryson, after checking everything twice, stood in the hallway with his arms crossed, glaring at the bloody splash on the wall. "It's not real. You jerks are just wasting your time. Here, I'll prove it to you, Tristan." He dragged his finger through the dark red spatter and stuck it in his mouth. And a moment later, he gagged, spitting it on the floor. "What the hell, dude? Did you idiots use animal blood? You could have warned me before I put that shit in my mouth." And then Bryson came at me throwing drunken punches, and we staggered into the living room. I tripped over a rug and we both fell, still fighting. It didn't take long for us to tire out, but we both had bloodied lips, and my nose was busted pretty bad. Wiping blood from his mouth, Bryson sat sprawled on the floor, cursing at me. I tried to tell him I had nothing to do with whatever was going on, but he only shook his head. He yelled for Tristan, saying it was time to go. Leaning over the edge of the couch, I looked down the silent hallway. Bryson yelled again. There was no answer, and a cold chill settled in my lower spine and traced its icy fingers over the back of my neck. I turned back toward Bryson, and he shot me the bird. "You even got him on it?" I shook my head, but couldn't say anything. I knew Tristan wasn't just hiding. Even drunk, I knew the others hadn't sneaked out or hid somewhere. There was nowhere to hide in the apartment. We got to our feet and he continued to give me a mad eye for a minute. Then he stormed into the kitchen. He yelped, and his sneakers squeaked on the floor, followed by a loud thud. As I stepped out of the living room and toward the kitchen, a flash of movement caught my eye at the other end of the hallway. Long, blonde hair, black, old-fashioned dress, and a quicksilver glint of a blade. Well, that's how my brain interpreted the moving image anyway. Bryson's cursing let me know that he was alright. I yelled at him to get out of there, but someone else was in the apartment. Running my hand blindly around the wall to the kitchen, I flipped on the overhead. Bryson's cursing took on a frantic tone, and all I could make out was, "It's blood." I looked into the room, and he was on the other side of the table. His shoes squeaked as he rose into view. He held up his hands, and they were smeared with dark red. He sniffed them, and his eyes glazed as he looked over the table to me. "This is real blood. What the hell is going on, Joel?" I shook my head and pointed down the hallway. I saw a woman, I think. A woman? You think? He asked as his face crumpled into a rage again. Before he could reach me and start throwing punches, I held out my hands. Easy, Bryson, I think something followed us home. The stories about the house swirled in my thoughts like a tornado. Demon, crazy murderer, witch, Satanist. Were any of these tales true? Did even one of them hold a grain of truth? After all, nonfiction is small truths hidden inside of lies. That line came to me from something I had read or heard back in junior high, and it never sounded more plausible. Joel, that shit's not real, he said flatly. However, all the rage drained from his face. I knew he was thinking about all the things we'd said as we threw bottles and stones at the house earlier, and all the stories about what had happened to idiots who had done it before us. You rattle a tiger's cage enough, and eventually you get hurt. I suppose spirits are the same way. Me and Max went out the other night and we were throwing bottles and screaming and taunting the thing, acting like macho dumbasses. I don't know, maybe we riled it up. I kept my voice low as if whispering would keep us safe. Keep me safe anyway. Besides, where the hell are the others? They're not here. The place is still locked. I peered down the hallway again and I thought I saw a quick shadow move across it. Bryson shook his head and eyed his hands. Scrubbing them against his jeans, he stepped to the hallway and looked toward the end. No one was here when we checked earlier, so how could a woman be here now? Listen, you've gone too far with this shit. He headed down the hall against all my protests. I liked the guy, the whole little group in fact, but I wasn't willing to follow him down that hallway. He flipped on the light in Max's room and yelled for whoever was in there to come out. When no one did, Bryson went in. My heart skipped a beat. He emerged and said that there was no one in there. After a thorough check of the rooms, he ended up in the bathroom, and I found him standing over the tub. The blood was gone. Only a filament-thin runnel remained in the center. As he turned his head to look at me, I saw his eyes stop moving just short of reaching me. The mirror was behind me. It was a warped funhouse mirror on the ancient medicine cabinet above the sink, and all the color drained from his face, and I slowly turned, dreading what I would see. The ghost-like image of a haggard man wearing a tattered suit jacket and vest leered out from some other dimension like a nightmare. I'm not sure which one of us made it to the front door first, but once we were in the car, Bryson revved the engine and started screaming about the woman in the living room corner. He described exactly the same figure I had seen dart into my bedroom. When he turned on to Deer Creek Lane, my drunk was gone. I was completely sober, and I demanded to know why we were there. And he said to apologize to whatever we'd pissed off earlier. At the time, it made sense. As he slammed the shifter into park, I was opening my door, eager to get it over. I was certain we would both be cut down as soon as we stepped out, but we weren't. Bryson screamed apologies toward the house. It stood there with its weird angles and yawed to the right, mindlessly ignoring the two morons who yelled out juvenile apologies. Then I saw something move in one of the tower windows and nudged Bryson. It moved again, like something swinging slowly back and forth deeper in the room. Bryson bolted for the house, leaving me with my paralyzing fear. The spectral image of the man in the mirror plagued me, made me feel small, impotent, helpless. The front door swung open easily and quietly, which scared me even more. Tilted as the house was, it would have been impossible for the door to open with such ease, if at all. The darkness consumed him, and I ran toward the open maw of the house. No way was I standing out there at 4 a.m. alone. Bryson's footfalls thudded quickly up the stairs directly in front of me, and I followed, calling out in a loud whisper for him to stop. There was cobwebs as thick as wool. It hung in great dramatic drapes from the portraits on the walls and the ornate wood handrail. The deep musky scent of decay made the air hard to breathe. And on the last landing, Bryson stopped suddenly, looking left and then right as if he had become disoriented. The thin fingers of moonlight splayed over the interior through wide rifts in the ceiling and walls, laying across everything in silvery strips. I caught up to him, and as I started to tell him we should just leave and call the cops, he pointed to a room. I think that's it. And before I could stop him, he was going through the door. The tilt of the floor, as I followed him, gave me a sense of vertigo, and the high-pitched scream he let out was cut short. I was already in motion, going through the doorway, and I couldn't stop. A tall man wearing an old tattered suit and a waistcoat stood in the center of the room. A bloody knife dangled from one gnarly, pale hand. I scrambled backward and hit the wall by the door, and I kept scrambling. I fell into the corridor. Bryson was gone, just like the others, and I was completely alone. In the house, the spirit that we had taunted. Springing to my feet, I saw the man begin to fade around the edges like fog dissipating. I spun and ran blindly down the stairs. At the bottom of the second level, a wavy, partially transparent figure of a small woman stood staring up at me. Her face was pale, and where eyes should have been was only swirling darkness. Her pale, long hair swept to the side as if a strong breeze was moving it. Grinning, she motioned for me to come to her. I bolted down the left, down a dark and badly slanted hallway, and then into the third room on the right. It was a bedroom. It was fully furnished, and instead of shades of black and gray, smudges of color appeared in the bed covers, the threadbare remnants of curtains and the wallpaper. The place seemed to be coming back to life. The blood of my companions had given it new life, and I would be next. The window wouldn't open. I couldn't break it. The house resisted my attempts at escape. The fireplace was tiny, but it was the only hiding place I could see, and I wasn't about to run back into that corridor. If I could hide until sunrise, I'd be safe, right? I mean, all the monsters and ghosts and demons would go into hiding at sunrise. That was the only logical thought I could grasp and hold on long enough to consider. Ancient suit puffed into whirls as I hunkered down and stepped under the mantel. The chimney was far too small to offer escape, but I could climb up and out of view, and leveraging my knees against one side and my back against the other, I could hold my position for quite a while, I thought. And I did just that. No matter how much rustling and shuffling I heard, even when the scent of death and decay hit my nose, filling my small space with its high, sweet stench, I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. The first ray of light offered me hope, but still I remained wedged into the fireplace until a bright runner of light lay across the warped boards of the floor. And that's when I ran to the car. The keys were with Bryson, wherever he was, so I ran to the police station and tried to tell them what happened. I even took them back to the apartment to show them all the blood. But it was gone. As gone as Bryson, Tristan, and Corey. I was so adamant about that. They had checked me into a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. It was a mandatory 72-hour observation. And, of course, they launched an investigation into the whereabouts of my friends. And I even stayed in the hospital for months before they would let me go. My friends have never been found. I wonder if they're still in that house somewhere, locked in the in-between world, roaming, lost in another dimension. Maybe one Halloween in the future, I'll be brave enough to go back there.